나도 저기 심지어 탐제 대화 되바래 동아미 되바래지 이 자스 나도 동아지 세고 거래 대화도 두고 그래 되네 자다 대비 탈도바지 산여 고바인 자다 심지어 탐제는 베네 대화다 대비 규대 템바다 심지어 동아다 라와다 아니 잠제다 잠바다 니지오콤 되네 심지어 탐제 동화 탐제를 줘야 상계 살랑이 꾸기 셈베게다 되네게 네 제게 라사남다 삼다 되네 심지어 탐제기도는 되네 자다 심지어 탐제기도 상요고바 토버쇼 셈베게다 전주셈 냠내제야데 두스제 제자다 심지어 탐제 상요고바 토버쇼 셈베게 전주셈 개바점기 다 상요고바 톱투고 말아 제서 상요고바 토발라 다 냠내제야데 조 가르제선다 파신두기 냠내지고 그래 제자 파신두기 냠내제 진배 냠내다 추리 냠내 너스베 냠내디기래 되네 자다 항상 그지 니마 제리다 진배 냠내다 파신두기 냠내 나네 다 진배 냠내다 추리 냠내 제다지 마 쉬차바래 디링 가지들 마 쉬어야 되다 스베 냠내 거마 쉬어야 돼.
Good evening. In our meditation, coming to recognize that all sentient beings without exception have a deep instinctive yearning to experience only happiness and avoid all suffering, frustration and misery. Reflecting on this then, we recognize that all results of happiness or suffering come from causes. Therefore, to experience happiness, one has to accumulate the causes for happiness, and to be freed of suffering, one has to eliminate previously accumulated causes for suffering, as well as no longer accumulate causes that will otherwise lead to suffering. Reflecting like this, one comes to see that it's through cultivating the paths of the Buddha Dharma, in particular to the point of perfection, where one is a Buddha, that the greatest form of happiness can be achieved. Moreover, going through our reflections, we cultivate love and compassion for others, recognizing that they too long for happiness that is undisturbed by any, even the slightest moment of misery. We reflect on this, generating the determination that not only may sentient beings achieve happiness and its causes, but we take it as our responsibility that they do so, as well as eliminate the causes that would otherwise lead to suffering. We develop this further, this determination, where we decide that in order to fulfill this deep yearning within me of ensuring all beings achieve liberation, I have to become a Buddha, the most skilled of guides. And here, where we commit to striving to become a Buddha for the sake of others, we generate bodhicitta within ourselves. But no matter how powerful and stable bodhicitta is within oneself, merely generating bodhicitta is insufficient for the goal of a bodhisattva, Buddhahood, to be achieved. Having generated bodhicitta, then the bodhisattva needs to engage in the practice of the six perfections, or training their mind in the six perfections. It's only then that they will accumulate the causes that will lead to Buddhahood. So of the six perfections, we have looked first at generosity, most recently at the second, ethical restraint, and tonight we'll commence with the third, that of patience.
발전주기 냠는 장고바도 소소라랑 나 산지 고방 토발라 소수기 균 차상 매바 수여제 아니 윤단제 상황지 마주바이나 현리아 판도 야침부 지투고 말바 지산 현리아 판도 제바나 소수기 균 남제세 윤단 탐제 소리야 다 튕긴 차상 현리아 판도 주비기 윤단 차상 소소라 요고고와 진행자다 산요고바 토고 그래지 지나다 산조고마 토베라 로자야 될야 안주기 진배님는 자하세도 랑기 류로제 계속다 제바 탐제야 야권절이야 부기 선비기 삼나다야다 야 양기 류로제 계속 탐제 심제 탐제를 심제를 받당기 디기주비야다 동아세에 된다라 당기 선비기 삼나도 진행하주 야네 양도 고미야디 내 진배님는 진배 공부 진배님는 제바세야 돼 냠는 공부하세야 차거와 안디나시 난이버도 주름세야 돼 안쪽에다 류가 유숨 요건에 셀라 뇌비게 자와사데 자오기는 지금에 선배게 당한 저기 출연념내 제한 삼다이디 야디 야네 야도 삼다이디 안 저기다 출연이 념내 제바서 제거와 어디네 다 개생이 딩이디 야 저기 쉬사바래.
The practitioner engages in the cultivation of the six perfections, such as generosity, ethical restraint, and patience, in order to overcome their own faults, as well as accumulate good qualities within themselves, but in order to be of benefit to others. So here, the spiritual practitioner is striving, making great endeavors. So they are putting in the effort, but the purpose, the objective, is to be of ever more benefit to others, to be able to benefit others in an ever more skillful and expansive manner. When cultivating the generous attitude, one's cultivating the wish to give to others, to be of benefit to others, to give to them. Secondly, the training in ethical restraint is cultivating the wish to not harm others. So the training in ethics, the training in generosity is primarily mental, developing the wish to give to others. And that of ethics is, again, primarily mental, generating the wish not to bring harm to others. And these one trains in repeatedly over a sustained period so as to transform our way of thinking.
Shengi Rangla Nuba Jebala, Tor Mirigba, Tor Miwediesa, Shengi Nuba Jebati, Denga Rangi, Rang Kola, Nuba Jevigi, Lele Yins and Odu Samdang Oreje.
That brings us now to our text, page 41, How to Train in the Perfection of Patience. And it starts out with the first point. When someone harms you, anger is not a worthwhile response. The harm that he does to you is just the karmic result of harm that you have previously inflicted upon another.
Semmachubaji Telia, Pa Kondo Malawaji, Semmachubaji, Detubaina, and the Sebas were this Seba said, the Sebigo Moro is in the Chagore, Shengi, Rangi, Rangla, Nebata, Ganga, Dinilea, de Caplaya, Semmachubaji, Kondo Malawaji, Sem Netubatella, Kingja Netabadella, and Sebas were.
What is meant then by patience? So in brief, patience is a mind that stays undisturbed in the face of adversity. So just like we've looked at in the previous trainings of generosity and ethics, these are primarily mental, so too is patience. So being patient is a mental response where the mind stays undisturbed. So for example, when one is harmed by others or is in a difficult circumstance, one's mind remains undisturbed. In particular, anger doesn't arise within one.
지당 저기 지난 베시 카컬 베시 다반에 쇠발라면도 근데 라바도 스타시도 잘라지고 초벌시티가 샤반에 샤양도 바 라바디기 야자지 라바도 마쇼와지 라바지도 자 데투반에 라바디기 지고 초벌디데 샤도 쇠발이다 다디네 샤샤도 라바디 자마도 마쇼서 반에 라바디 야자니 자에데 마쇠발에 자마투발에 다지 자마투발에 마투발에 자 투구에는 쇠발에 지상 편이 네바지야다 강아 유도 셈 추조반에 마쇠발이다 쇠투고 말 그래서 셈 마투바지 파 코노 말라와다 셈 링자 네투바다 가라 회바이가 네투바이나 셈그 쇠발에 저거 저거 간절에 네바 semle ne tugo mare kaji phashu tiki je ne tugo mare khon pen phaji ne ba ki ben sosle jine soso namsa delia khon la so ben ne swe ma tu bare je phini ne ba ro ji kyunju ro kar che ben soso le sem ma pha khon ma la ba je sem ma tu ba ji ne tu ba ne swe ba je sem gi pha de tugo re kaji kyogo re ka donda ji so swe ba se de.
So we take a synonym for patience, that of forbearance. If hot water or hot substance is poured into the palm of your hand, immediately we'll drop our hand away. We can't bear that pain. So the practice of patience or the practice of forbearance is forbearing difficulties. So in the context of the actual practice of patience then, what one can bear is harm. What one is patient with is harm. In another way to express it is one's own mind cannot be harmed by a particular situation. That is when one is being patient. One's mentally is not being harmed by the situation.
Zada nganzola kareseone penemichigi nganzo tsiksutroda jig lamsa gyönjö chebena lamsa nganzoe nema chebje lamsa khor phale len jeruwada gyönjö chene kyora dim pha tsiksusheda dong nakbo deada khorla sobana su musiba charu. Zan denigi laba ine sosogi denigi tanganzogi kontra malama se machuba tebane suba sura cheza denigi de tuyadi le lamsa kaborwa cheza deni zang zo suba kom se de yane ya de denigi shengi kanga da gyunzu maji nyele na nganzu ba samna yane ya do samdang khore so suba kom se de kanas komora se tangale ya shengi nyoba cheba ina delya kontra zawgi langme a sembege denigi pa yane yano samdang khore deni samdava dela söva komba sigurwa tanga söva kom sede.
If we take a situation where someone speaks to us in an inappropriate manner, perhaps they swear at us, they belittle us, they ridicule us, usually we will get upset, we'll get angry, we'll get upset, we may even respond in kind to them. But if one is skilled in this training of patience, one's mind will stay undisturbed. No matter what they said to us, how they've spoken to us, our mind will stay calm and at ease. Now we know from our own experience, it's difficult to have such a response. We may be able to control our tongue, but for our mind to stay undisturbed no matter how someone is speaking to us, this is difficult. But it's only difficult because we lack training. If we've trained repeatedly over a sustained period, we'll be able to instinctively respond in a way that's skillful, coming from a mind that is undisturbed no matter how we're being treated. And what is it that we need to train in? Well, in brief, cultivating the thought based on reasoning that it is inappropriate to ever respond in a harsh manner. It's inappropriate even to allow afflictions such as anger to arise. Training like this mentally, meditating like this mentally, repeatedly, this will then give us the habituation so that when we are in such a circumstance, our training will kick in and we will spontaneously ensure our mind stays calm and at peace.
제가 먼저 세비게 냠네 세바세야들 릭미로 다 대선숨 치고래 제가 동안라 짐에 가서 뇌발라 짐에니 베게 세바세데 뇌 셴기 뇌바 체발라 델리아 셈마토바 뇌바 뇌발라 짐에니 베 세바 근데 동아 당랭게 세바세데야 강아를 체여되다 데네게 대당랭게 세바 냠네지야 다 쳐라 뇌버 메비게 네 세바세 녜셈기 쳐라 녜셈기 세바세데 데네게 다양적인 양주 검냠는 지하다 기회자ው 두발라 양지기 쇠버 검고 쇠버 검투 검고야 데네기 아니 릭 쇠발 마서 예발 마서 릭 숨치거래.
So that then is in brief the entity or what is meant by patience. Then patience, the training in patience is divided into three divisions. The first is the patience of disregarding harm done to you by others. The second is patience in facing hardships or willingly accepting hardships that arise throughout life. And then thirdly, the patience of conviction with respect to the Dharma. So just to say in our text, the first two aren't differentiated so well, so I'll just correct the layout I made in the text a little bit. So the first division is what we have indicated by the Roman numeral 1, just below the outline on page 41. Patience of disregarding harm done to you by others is the first. The third is what we have on page 42 by the Roman numeral 2. That is actually the third division, patience of conviction with respect to the Dharma. And the second division is not so clear in our text, but it starts at the bottom of page 41 with that very first bullet point. When you experience pain and suffering, that is where the second division starts, although the text doesn't make it explicitly clear. And that second division is patience in facing the hardships that arise throughout life.
And the Nirvana Jimmy Buseva said, Mishengi, socially, never Chevaina, Delia, Savacom Sigurva. That in that Mishandachi, Sosolia, Yedon Diada, the nigger Sosuke Jala, the Troya, that in the Chena, Savacom Gressidu, Yedon Tabene, and Chica, oh, Danga Savacom Gues and Yedon, Suen Dueda, and Jala, the Troto, and Adanga Savacom Gues and Coral Gazikana Chejuba, the Dinichadi, Sevareves and Disigoma, the Dinilla Goma, Ninjimi, Yonke or Lagoma, Savacom City. So si mi shanda so so le nebe che de so so gyong jang yang ji ku jin de ho de la go ma de yan di ko lo zhe gi nya yo ba.
Right at the outset, I need to make one point very clear in terms of what is meant by patience. So let's say one is in an awful situation, someone is physically assaulting one, or someone is breaking one's possessions, and you think, oh, I'm a Buddhist, I need to be patient in such times. Therefore, I will just take the beating, or I'll just allow them to break my things. I will be patient. That is a misunderstanding. That is a misunderstanding. Being patient doesn't mean being a doormat.
소수기 셈마 투바체 셈 코로 말롱 바체 되두고이나 데르 셔바콤 바세 셔바콤 투바세 걸 셔바콤에 디레 바 코로 말라바체 다 코로 말랑 바체 팔레야 코로 나바 있는 건 저가서는 팔레 직습시야다 균죄지야다 자르고 그래서 코로 말랑 바체 셈마 투바체 템보지 되베 안에 다양 네 소소리아 지게 소소의 나니 매바다 소소기 꽤 매발의 균주 제베네 양 소소 콩로 말랑바 심 마투베 때네 양 콩로에 템바라 퇴지하다 디디바 야와 체야다데 세부스여 고야다 차야디 디 모이니스 차고래 저자 제보 검세도 파 콩로 말랑바 제가 봐 렌제들라 콩로 말랑바지 렌제베 지다 콩로라네 렌제 니체로 와 파주 균주 지야도 콩로 말랑바지 아니 템바라 퇴지 디디레 균체시 결혼한 디 노르지 데니데레스 균체야다 봐 시제 템바라 퇴지디 소소 코로 말라와지 디데바르지도 지상 코로 말라와지 까투바디 세포 공발이다디 지세 덴바르지야데 고dim찬 왜 봐죠 다야직 미견지시도 번지도 덴바르지베 빼 코로 시고라지 나래 견제 디마르서 간조 코로 시고라지 파콜이야지 라트지야죠와 지세 디 세포 공마도 봐 가서 셈 소소한 셈 두고라 코로란 거래 지세 디 세포 공마도 봐래 지세 파졸리에 템퍼레처 코 지키 팔렌로 고요베네 소소 셈마추고 코로모 파졸로 코로 말랑바지 셈 흘려지 되비 되투비 안에 코로라 렌로야다 템방우이니 수도는 렌로야디 코 진디고르마도 세보콤시도 아니 용케데 말에 다가질 용케고요 말에 가지고 세보콤시도 셈마추바지 파 코로 말랑 돼야디 디리 가지고 제상한지 렌접도 갈라 근데 코로 말아서 흘려지는 발렌제 지다 어제 코로나지 람사 심 추진 차가지 자지 심 추니 코로나지 렌제지 이용구로 와 제사디 차가지 저 코로나인데 세버고 마도 바래 지고 렌제 바래데 이나다 코로 말아 심 추마추바제 흘려되진 그 템퍼레처 쉐베네 그 세버고 그 세버고 병안에 홀리안 템퍼레처 좀 렌제 거로 바디 디 세버고 바세 디시고요
Rather than, how does one respond in a patient manner? So if one, ideally, well, to respond in a patient manner, one's response should not show any anger. And ideally, what this means, or what this actually means, is not merely that one's speech and behavior doesn't appear to be that of an angry person, but one's mind actually is not angry. Anger has not arisen. So we have someone who's giving us a hard time, But being patient means our mind stays undisturbed, and we can respond. We can tell them, please stop what you're doing. What you're doing is harmful. This is not appropriate, or it's mistaken. We can respond. But one responds with a mind that is not afflicted. So when we respond to harm from another, we can respond in two streams, in one of two general ways. Either with a mind that is afflicted, we then speak or act, or with a mind that is not afflicted, where disturbing emotions are not dominating, we then speak or act. So being patient doesn't necessarily mean one doesn't respond. Being patient means one's mind is calm. Anger in particular hasn't arisen. If anger arises, we will respond in an angry way, or even if we control how we speak, still with an angry mind, our mind is afflicted, therefore we are not thinking clearly, and we are not likely to respond skillfully. Whereas if our mind is patient, we will be able to respond skillfully, because we'll be able to think clearly. So therefore, patience is a mind that is in accordance with reality, because it is not an afflicted mind. So the meaning of patience then again is a mind that is undisturbed in the face of adversity. And with this undisturbed mind, one can then make the choice whether to respond or not, and if to respond, how to do so skillfully.
Geshe notru mangbu sigre Geshe la notru mangbu sigre and di kingi and the gansam la and jige shuri daya de nyanga yor ruada konro de shukche shar dele konro shukche ne pacho de konro shukche de zeba de manga yor da di thone and jige gansam chile and jige jingli sho ya da tabsing che ya de nyanga yor wa 지난데 셈마주바체 안에 지금 셈마주바 뢰뢰 안 파코로 말라마 셈마주바네 시디 아주 리버디 템부 샤고 제바자 기시시에 되게 원인구에니스 튠비게 안에 딱다루지 약보를 시투야기 너트 마셔야기 개발에 연구하더네.
Again, we'll know from our experience that when we are someone is giving us a hard time, if we are not patient, we will be angry and respond. If we respond through our anger, the situation is likely to escalate. So this we've either probably have done ourselves, or certainly would have observed it as well. However, if one's trained well, and despite what someone is saying or doing to one, if one has trained well, one's mind will naturally remain at peace, at ease. And being patient then, one's wisdom can shine through. And one can then make the decision, what is the most appropriate way to respond? Is it silence? Is it to say something or to do something? And one can then do it. So this is being patient, a mind that is undisturbed. And then one can choose whether to respond or not.
안내발에 지면이 배서봐 디데 나 저기 데니게 영야라 녀레네 데니게 마용녀야 소소라 야네 야도 야네 삼다야레 다가질 시행기 된 시바나 델야 콘트세드 자오기니 랑메 아 선베게 야네 야도 삼다와이나 나 저기 데니게 균주 집에 내갑지글야 genji teji de yobaina lamsa oda konlane digmara asambe samlodi lamsa jenguchi tentu bore dinangan nomyune denege gomshi maso baina lamsa denegli yodena oda konlan digmara sambe samle digmara lamsa konlaje pa lamsa kon dibeje daje nomyu denji gesheirmada yungmara jiza dene zangan jo nyelene yas masansane ya ane denege gyende male nyelene gidi ne ngajo samlo nala ya dene 데니기 시행지 영알에 누려봐 기본 델야 콘서 자오긴 랑마 셴리아 콘서 자오긴 랑메 지기메 선배게 누시네 야네 야노 삼다야 차고래.
To be able to respond skillfully in the face of adversity, one needs to train repeatedly over a sustained period so as to weaken our habituation to anger arising when harsh things are said to us or unwanted activities done towards us. So we need to break a habit, and the stronger that habit is, the more time we'll need to spend repeatedly meditating on seeing the faults of anger and certainly of responding under the influence of anger. And then the more time to spend to see what is a more skillful response and how to cultivate that. So we need to reflect, to come to see that anger is always inappropriate. It is never justified. Although in certain circumstances, one needs to respond in a firm manner, in a manner that's clear and strong, that response is best when it's done with a mind that is at ease, a mind that is not afflicted, because then one's responding in a way that is in accordance with reality. One can think clearly. But to be able to do so repeatedly over a sustained period, one needs to reflect on the faults of anger, and that anger always is inappropriate and unjustified.
Sewa gombigi, penyen, sewa magombigi, sewa magombane gyun dende yungudu sembigi, sebi magombigi nyemik samdang. Sewa gombane dende penyen dende yungudu sembigi, sebi gombi penyen samdang yada. Dene sewa magombi nyemik samdang duschene, sam jebache samdang gore, gong samdang gore sirche, jebache gore. Jebache ina, ane sewa magomne gyun chi tonga. Sewa gomna penyen tonga du, penyen yugyo, yende yugyo di ngazo di danglen, 당도 레알에 비슷이기로와 gyun 통선은 gyun 유교대 나는 가서 봐야기 근데 삼 리기로와 진짜 되는서 쇠비기 판연다 쇠비 gyun데 야내야도 삼당 오래시고 제바제 오래서 그래.
The approach one takes is one of analytical meditation, and applying a technique that we use in many walks of life, where you look at the benefits and faults of a particular decision. So we think about patience. What are the faults of patience and the benefits of patience? What are the faults of not being patient? What are the benefits of being patient? And we think again and again, so what are the faults of not being patient? We look at our own experience, what we ourselves have experienced or observed, and likewise the benefits. And just like in other walks of life, when the benefits and faults of a particular activity are abundantly clear to us, our behavior will change. Likewise with meditation too.
초보를 미외대 시대 생기 소슬레 네바 제바는 파콘라나 디기오 마레스 웨바 마레스 디기오 마레스 아니 교용고리에서 도와 미디데 아니 안델이야 단 미외비 김생 가레 람나당 아주두스네 삼다에도 안다데 아주 삼다베네 추콘 쟁기 네바지 파콘을 라바이나 능 아주 가르용고리에서네 아주 그도 델이야 소소 콘로 슈심보라도 콘로기 끼인지네 파철이야 랭 가르쳐고 딱딱 자야 돼. 이 야고지 겹투야래 바시치고 그래. 내가 아주 이렇게 쯧쯧버려 잡아있네. 얘 아는 아주 지 파시리 제위나 아니 코로나 봐도 코로기 심마로 코로 숙침볼라이데 코로기 셰들레 직습다 두가마도 샤샤마 제가 되는자 야고시도 코로 말라와지 파 셈르시기 되어봐야지 되어나 뭔고 리버드 상알이고 가르가라고도 거기 되네 라기도와 안 되네 랍네 디라고도 아셈베게 삼로디 리버드 중알이고 되네자 되네 삼다베네 코로 말라서고 코미아디 서고 콤바이나 안 판도 채와 여바도 소수기 판도 채와 여바 이제 dene samta ya na 지금 gewa dipa samta bene chu dine chedo pa khon la ba ina ane khon di digbare chisan dibi digi ane khon la ba inja digi wange nga ju soso digpasa ane nga ju khon ga je shukche la ne khon ga je la so ne phajo de le khon shukche le ro an phajo le khon shukche chaya da an digi an che de le na khon dige soso gi bu me da khon pa 저버드 파 잠샤지 나를 줘도나 코르디게 빠직디 슈겐제네 셈마기바 차야 드누 삼로 나라가선 니 고갑시는 콜이야게 디네라고 디네 제고 선배 네바 디네 기우 선배 삼로디 망고슈지 코르디네 칼라사나 기우메게 데니우야 고마토게 데니기 강아디 연구를 써보 고마톰다 강아디네 연구 바디 저기 통쇼스규바 책으로 봐 제가 데네 두시네 써보 마공바이나 괜찮은 여바다 서버 공부에는 편연되게 두시네 서버 공부에는 샘플시 오다디 콜라시울라때 네콜레 되는 라비스때 약보중 소스 병아라야 아니 지되는 샘플시 책으로 봐되네 이제 내가 삼다베네 서버 공부게 편연다 마공부게 예미로 디 책으로 봐
In the text doesn't make explicitly clear the three divisions of patience. So we're looking at the very first division, the patience of disregarding harm done to you by others. And here the reflection starts out with thinking about the faults of anger and the benefits of patience. And we see here what we have as the first point. When someone harms you, anger is not a worthwhile response. Or instead of worthwhile, we could say anger is an inappropriate response. So here we reflect on the faults of anger, why anger is inappropriate. And we rely on both our own personal experience of when anger has arisen or from what we observe. And when anger arises within us, because our mind becomes afflicted, our wisdom can't shine through. And this means we end up struggling in the moment to respond in a skillful manner. Probably some hours later, still angry, still reflecting on what happened, we then think of the perfect thing to say. And the reason we couldn't think of it at that time was because our mind was afflicted. We couldn't utilize our wisdom. And in fact, and moreover, when angry, not only can we not respond skillfully, but the spontaneous response would be just to swear back at the person, to respond to them in an equally afflicted manner. Moreover then, when we think about the karmic impact, the arisal and dominance, the arisal and abiding, the arisal and dominance of an affliction such as anger is that non-virtue is being accumulated. The stronger the anger in our continuum, the more a non-virtue accumulated, and the more likely that we will act under this affliction of anger, and thereby make our non-virtuous karma even stronger. The stronger the anger is, the less likely we are to refrain from responding under the influence of anger, and therefore the karma will multiply ever further. Moreover, through responding under the influence of anger, we'll make the situation worse, and there's a relationship between the strength of the anger and how long our mind stays disturbed, possibly for hours or for days afterwards. And quite possibly, we'll remember and keep thinking back to this event for weeks or even months afterwards. And also, in dependence on the strength of that anger, we may lose our appetite, struggle to sleep, and so forth. So these are faults of anger that you may well have experience of, direct experience in your own life, from either experiencing it yourself or observing it elsewhere. And then on the terms of so those would be some of the short-term faults of anger. And in terms of some of the short-term benefits of patience would be that when one's mind is undisturbed in such a situation, none of that would happen, which means one's wisdom can arise, one can respond in a skillful way, in a way to diffuse the situation, a way to be of benefit in the situation. That may mean responding firmly, it may be apologizing, but one can have the wisdom to think clearly. Thereafter, when the situation's finished, one's mind is still relaxed. one is perhaps joyous that one dealt with that difficult situation so skillfully, and then you forget about it and you go on with your day, as opposed to having anger abiding with one. So these then are some of the short-term faults of anger and benefits of patience.
And ane jige shingi nyoba chidu pa soba kumado ji kongro laba ina kongro korang digbare diba di wangi ngang zoge lengan basa an kiawa chima ina ya ane ngang sola ki yagi gyuchadu gore ane ngang zoge kiawa nyema ga sa shaba ina yoba ina kiawa digi pan kongro di wangi nyoba chungro tang gore chezang soba kumado ba ina yuan di che daya jige soba kumba ina pa sem machuwa je kolya sik soba kumtuba ina ane nga zo galligresin oda ko dene khor shula ni ningje sanbegi ko ningje khor ya ningje ge tu gore che soba magomna khor na ningje ge tu mare che zanda soba gombana o ka khor shu be chu sha da ko sem chu khor shu la sha ningje sanbe ningje gom tu gore ningje gombana so su ge ko le jamba de ningje samdang we na samdang ye de pa ju ge khor de ya ma shi ye gi pan du gore ma shi du gore che za ngan ju ge khor la de ngan ju khor la ba na 파주의 공로의 슈체를 주고 그래. 지상 파주의 공로의 매바수에 시에야 아 저기 잠재 공부는 그 공로의 시투고 그래. 지상 디네자 아주 세버 공부했나 세버 공부도 콜레 아니 그 슈 투샤선 비게 잠바다 니지기 기투고 그래. 잠바다 니지기 봐나 그 공로의 마 시투고 그래. 지네자 아주 세버 공부 봐나 아니 예 제발 안 디네기 잠바다 니지 공부는 니 개화래 개화 슈치 뭐 자고 그래. 디기 개위 또비엔 안나가지고 잠니제나 산지게 살아 줘야게 잠니제 깨야 돼 뉴바디에 파 뉴바 쳐줘야다 안나 몽바이네야 아니 제게 아주 디기 주야다 된저 만저 마마게 된저를 깨투야다 어두시 용거와 디는 자당가지고 배내갑게 아주 두스네 서버 공배 편여다 마공배 예미 삼다나 두스네 삼다 이슬람에
Furthermore, anger being an affliction, it creates karmic causes that, should they ripen as a propelling karma, can only lead to rebirth in the lower realms. Moreover, anger serves to weaken the strength of our previously accumulated virtue. So these are some of the faults of anger. A more skillful way to respond is to have trained previously in love and compassion. Because if one can respond to harm from others with the arisal of love and compassion within oneself, immediately for oneself, one's own mind stays calm and peaceful, and therefore one is practicing patience due to the arisal of love and compassion. Moreover, one is accumulating positive karma, virtuous karma, and thereby accumulating causes for rebirth in the upper realms. So instead of getting angry and creating the karma that leads to lower realm rebirth, one generates love and compassion and thereby creates the causes to be reborn in the upper realms. Moreover, there's a benefit for the suffering being, the angry person before oneself, because if one is responding with love and compassion, one will be able to respond in a skillful manner, diffuse the situation, allow that suffering being for their afflictions to subdue, and thereby their suffering can lessen as well. And this comes about in dependence on our virtue, on our virtuous outlook, our virtuous minds of love and compassion.
다디네 델마 셴기 녀바 제바데 나르랑게 콜라 녀바 계비게 레레 인신세 디네 삼당 고레제레 제자다 셴기 녀바 제바디에서 되네 소소라랑게 미기 잘라 소소게 잘라디 현다게 구마제 초제 구마 쳬도바다 안 셴기 소소리아 니동 당제 소소 나자다 되네게 강아 제바 있나 안에 안디 가서 가르삼당 고레람나 데니스 오다디 디 자왕아마네 콜야 콜롱기 콜레파 뇌제 안디기 레기 제부딩 알아라 다데 민고레스 삼당고레 데네 삼다바이나 디파 콜라잉 랑 말에서 다가 쇠보고미야기 책임을 지다 진짜 딩이 코 제마 자왕아마 당아랑게 콜롱을 잘라고 마자 디 제보 게 잘라도 거의 쳐봐라 구마 구바래 거의 쳐봐래 지산다 말이야 주녀버지에 대한 개왕아마 나랑게 파콜에 녀버지여 디에서 디기 제보 말이야 제보디 민고래 삼제 두삼당고래 디삼당에는 파쇼기 녀버지인들이야 안에 코름 말아야게 개봐요래서 두신의 삼다자 어다디 제상 콜이야 콜랑 거에 민두 가르세네 디 나랑게 개왕아마 파녀버시기 디 제보디 민고래 지산 나랑게 사시비 제보디 나랑에 민요디 나 콜이야 콜랑 거야 김체가 민두와 선배 두산 삼다제 삼당고래 디네 삼다는 파쇼고 kom야게 두신의 삼당고래 김제로지 대 코로나를 봐 녀마 코로나를 내버 기와로와 코로나에 제보다 중요와 개왕아마 코로나에 잘랑아서 수초여바나 나 대디디 코로나에 가서 잘라 쳐로거라 되네 연구로 와야 왜 미치 봐서 나다 개왕아마로 와다 유지 봐서 미 내려와
Looking again at the text, the harm that he does to you is just the karmic result of harm that you previously afflicted upon another, or perhaps you should say, inflicted upon them. So here, when we are experiencing hardship from others, perhaps they're physically assaulting us, or they've stolen from us, usually we respond with anger at this person, and perhaps coming along with this, the thought of, or the subconscious thought of, why this shouldn't be happening to me. I'm faultless in this. I'm faultless in this situation. But even expressing it like this should make it clear that that way of thinking is ignoring the karmic relationship here, because what is happening is a formerly accumulated karmic seed is now ripening. So that there's something unwanted is happening to us, this is sure, that this is clear, but it's not causeless. We have created the cause for this to happen. In the past, we have perhaps assaulted them in a previous existence, or stolen from them, and now that karmic seed that we ourselves created is ripening. So thinking like this removes the possibility of us being angry at them for what they are doing to us, but rather reminding ourselves, due to our own previous non-virtuous activity, we are now experiencing that negative, unwanted result. And thereby we're not angry with them, but we're recognizing that this is in accordance with the reality of cause and effect.
모더로지 잔다지 구마지 케로바이나 다 케스는 구마 케스는 케사와네 베네 잘라카나지 구마 케사와이나 케요나 다 소소나게 아니 미 잘라쿠샤 구마 쇼샤 미디 구마 케샤 미디 페 두자레 페 직 마랍 슈레스 두시 야네 야도 콜야 두섬다나 가즈로 콘로사제 안 셈마키와 차마도 용 셈마키와 차 잘라라바체 잘라라비기 서비젤야 용치라르와 안디간에 셈마키와 차제 배 코로나데 지게 계시네 코로나데네 되디 셈마키와 용니자라로 그러와 진짜 데네기 잘라라소바나 케소바나 데네 구마 쇼소바나 오다 니 잘라라샤스 되고 케샤스 당에 개왕아마기 그 코롱기 개왕아마기 디코잘 구마 구유기레 다디기 말레기 디브 넘버 민고레 삼베게 두신 삼다베네 코로랑고마 코로말라바자 셈네 흘려시 차고래 지산 데네기 흘려시 차도갑라 아니 간저 가르 고급 요르서 야델레 진비 냠는 제야 고급 요르 오다건 미디고 코 네절라 모도 구구마구아디 콜야 강아지 체벌 인제 다운에 네절라리 코랑 구아디 코로나 비제 야고야 판도 침부 주네 야고래 다 코로나 네디 코로나 진비 인삼베 삼다샤베네 그 진비 냠네 차르고 진발리 용거 진짜 되네 삼다도 아 저게 셈마 투바지 레기네 두 삼다베네 콜야 닝지에서 몇 잠니지 검토야다 안 소수게 잘라라바디야 근데 코로나에 펜바야 보용을 쇼 콜야 진바인스베 삼다셔는 진비 냠네 차르 소수게어 안 잘라라바디 오다딩이 잘라 제로젤럽능이 제카고리 롱바능이 제투고 말에 코로나도 캐러 빼고 주셔당이 코로나 진비인스베 두 삼다베는 소수게 진비 냠네 안 지게 두스네 냠네 차고로 되네자 셈 되네게 잘라데 미샨다고 구바이나 구쇼와이나 델리아 삼로 안 쇠버 검투바이나 소술레 진비 냠네 제투야 안 잠니제 검투야 안 디게 계사 봐도 매바사도 그래 다 콩로라바이나 다 셈마지바 차베 진예나 니무고 되네 칼라사나 기우메 게디나 디스 야네 야도 야네선 둘둘 뱀마지바 차되네 칼라사 모두 니야고마고도 수보교차 되네 수보레 나사찬달레 얘기 냥아 첨부시고 용거라 되네 자 저기 두체네 김세 삼단 쇠버 검나 아니 판도도 제사 쇠범 검마도 왜네 괜데네 두심베 두신의 삼다제 제바제제 두시 오래 송으로다
If you've had something of yours stolen, perhaps your car stolen or another possession, you know your mind tends to get really upset. One may think about, oh, what an awful person they are, how could they take this, especially if it's something that is valuable or something that we value greatly. So here we are angry, and we are angry at this unknown thief, and these thoughts dominate our mind. They don't dominate our mind just for some moments or even some hours, but really for quite some time. And even when we calm down a bit, they stay powerful just behind as we go about our daily activities, we're still really upset, and it's there in the background. Now, we ask ourselves, what is the benefit of responding in that way? Does it help us get our stolen property back? Of course not. And not only does it not help us get our stolen property back, but it keeps us mentally in a state of misery. So therefore there's only loss. In fact, our loss is compounded because we've lost our possession and we've lost our mental peace. Rather, if we have trained well, meditated well beforehand, what we'll see here is the karmic interaction that's playing out. We'll understand that this is a ripening of an imprint, of a non-virtuous karmic seed that we ourselves accumulated in a past life. And we'll see it as nothing more than that. Nothing more than this karmic interplay. And in thinking like that, our mind stays relaxed and at peace. Of course, we still don't get our possession back, but our mind is at peace. And now with our mind being at peace, in other words, not being afflicted, we can rather practice generosity towards this person, knowing that they are so overwhelmed by attachment that they stole. So, they've got it, they've got what they stole, they can have it. We can let it go. It was once ours, it's now theirs, I let it go. And the mind continues to stay at peace. We now no longer have lost the possession, rather we've mentally given it to the thief. And also being aware that they were overwhelmed by attachment, we know that they are afflicted. Therefore they were suffering when they stole, and moreover, they have created the causes that will lead them to suffer greatly in future lives. Thinking about their suffering, love and compassion arises for them. And we can only generate a generous attitude as well as love and compassion towards this thief because our mind is patient. In other words, it's undisturbed in the face of this particular adverse circumstance. And therefore, we can practice generosity and develop compassion for the suffering being who thinks that they are creating, through stealing, they're creating causes for happiness, but in fact they're creating causes for further suffering. And here we generate compassion for this being. So that's a much more skillful response. We still are without our stolen possession, but if we had got angry, we'd equally be without the stolen possession, we would have lost our mental peace in addition, we would struggle perhaps to sleep or to eat, and our mind would remain dominated by our anger. So this is therefore generating patience is a far more skillful response.
Sebo ko matu gen dige be de na ki u me cha si cha de ne ba ji bom bo lia gyön jue jia da be ji ga wa de tigi mi do sa gyön jue jia ngo lo jap tin chi lo ba de ne nian do we ju de ne ji ge na xin yi ga la ga nga che de gen ji ko sebo ko matu ge gen ro sebo ko ma ze na lo de tu go ma sem de la ji be cha si ge jie jie de ne chi lo ma de ya da ngo lo jia da gyön jue jia de ji go lo 자 sebo kum tu ba na oda ji ko chumarone deni samdan odadi bombodigi katum jedi mi azugi mi malya nazede magoyege machabyage dondala chigor chesa azugi sola sungkyup chigor azugi di yagure sambige samlodi kortugurwa deni za ko semlya de lele chadugurwa je sebo kommadumne makiwada ganga chagor sebo kum tu ba na den ko den야 ne chige sem 마주볼 lele che sosogi na dejen leagaro karchevene ko je tuya de chagorwa.
If you think of our experience with the pandemic, certainly up here, but certainly those in Melbourne were confined to their homes for a lengthy period. And even up here... And so, in this we've also seen around the world where people have been confined to their homes. And we've seen, from what we've seen on the news, I don't think there was anything here, but what we saw on the news is that some people really got upset with this. Maybe they would just express this verbally to their friends, but others got quite angry at their authorities who had confined them to their home, weren't allowing them to go to work or to go to other people's place of work. And then they went out on the street and protested, and they got into conflict with the police and so forth. So this was a way of responding to a situation that was not in accordance with the training of patience, because afflictions arose and dominated the mind. Whereas rather a more skillful way would have been to take care of one's mind. And when circumstances such as being, the law being that you have to stay at home, when one is encountering such an adverse circumstance, then take care of your mind. Keep it positive. Watch for the rise of the afflictions and counteract them. Rather see the benefits of the situation and utilize the unwanted situation in a skillful manner, and thereby experiencing it as actually a beneficial circumstance.
Koron lang kontre rawan meba jeba yinbe nyelen je merung sine ondu samdang gole chere jeza koron la sidi da sosul nebi jinde koron lo konro sabaina jeza konro sabano kontre ge rawan midele rawan yo mares jeza mile rawan meba je ngala ya nebi ji gore jeza jenza ngi midele nebi kina pa korlana de digi mindu karasin ko midela rawa yuni mindua chesa dinichinan du samta che an sunne be kin delia an konro malang ba che du chin samta ba ne konro malang ba di sebo kom yagi ko kom tu grese ore.
And looking again at the text, also as he has no mental control and is helplessly overpowered by anger, becoming angry and hurting him would be inappropriate. So this is another skillful way to deal with an unwanted situation with another person. To remind oneself that this person who is now perhaps harming us or speaking to us in an abusive manner, they have no freedom, they have no mental control in this situation. They did not choose to become angry. They did not choose to therefore become overwhelmed by their anger. And being overwhelmed by anger, they have had no choice but to speak or act towards us in the way they are. So here, we're recognizing that this person has no freedom. They are not acting intentionally. Rather, their anger has so dominated them. This anger which arose spontaneously, not intentionally, has also so dominated them that they are speaking or acting in the way that they are. They are without freedom.
키루치네 미치기 키디 파 탁바 따제 파 텐수 텐 갈레 슈 당괴바네 나 키디 파로 수로제라 라와요 말와 가서네 미기 탁바데 탱고로와 탱제노고 키레 파로 수로제라 라와기네 메바레 제상 콜레야 강아슈지 라와 메바 파로 수로제 강아슈 예데데 마즈디 통바에나 가르섬 그러시네 키딜 바 닝지기로와 베닝제다 키디 강아슈도 베 닝제 산베 닝지게다 당아도 술은 견주지기르신 미델 견지기로와 진짜 미델 견지지데 가서 미디기 키딜 파랑 텐 파된 수된 제저 거의 제 강아 키딜 강아 되고 있으면 삼장아주 미델이야 안지 야고민도 삼글마다 키딜라 고 야고민도 삼상바라 키딜 닌지기로와 가라서는 키딜라 라와요 말와 그래서 미디기 탑에다 파래서도 파도 수로 강한테 길라 라와메바래 그 라와메바 파도 수로 지거 진짜 되는 현상은 그 라와메바 그 규디 통로도 안 키코로나 라신기 인제다 되네게 키강을 강한테 미델이야 안 견주제야 된 아주 그 라와 삼나 리그로와 니나시 파저 미디 배 콩로 시우지 라바나 콩로로 시우지 나지 아주를 측수부터 규제 시우지기나 미델이야 라와요 말했어 제가 라와요 막 가서는 거기를 콩도 쉬우발 콩도기 쉬긴 제제 말이야 되네게 수수자 뇌바기에 지고르스 닝제 섬이 미델이야 되네 삼다베네 미델이야 가서 콩로디 발라야게 삼리기 말에 콩도기 말해서 안에 콩도 마기베 sab라네 갈리거스 미델이 닝제 섬이 그 콩로에 상원도 교시하서 되네 닝제 섬이 닝지게 두고레스 제가 되네 인자 바 안두 삼다베네 안에 가서 아주 서버콤이야기 안 검토야기다 차기엔로서 뉴스 삼다는 서버 검토 그래서 서버 검야 디 안도 삼당 그래서 그러다 이제 코로나 미디어라 코로나 같은 뇌비 미디어라 콘트 라와 메바 제바레스 지상 콘트게 콘트 코로나 콘트 계제 코 라와 메바 안 알아야 뇌비 지고 지상 이 미디어야 내래 뇌바 파 알아 뇌서서 미디어 파 뇌바 진데 자오기는 지금 누워서 두 삼당 그래서 지상 내내 고 삼당에도 뇌세베 냠는 제투 그래서 그렇지.
An analogy one can use in one's meditation is if one walks past a home and it has a vicious dog that barks and is very aggressive towards one. But then one looks more closely and recognizes that the dog is chained up. And the chain is very short, just perhaps a meter or two. And every day one walks past, the dog continues to be aggressive. One sees that no matter what time of day or night, or time of year one walks past that house, the dog remains chained outside. So whether it's the heat of the summer or the cold of winter, daytime or nighttime, the dog is chained up outside. The dog is clearly unhappy, clearly tormented, and therefore is expressing this aggression continuously, but has no freedom or no control over their situation, no control therefore over how they respond. They are so overwhelmed by the suffering of their situation that aggression spontaneously comes forth. Recognizing this pitiful situation that this dog is in, spontaneously compassion will arise within us. When the dog barks at us again and snarls at us, ever stronger compassion for the dog will arise. So understanding this then, we apply it to an angry person, recognizing that they have no control over themselves. They have no freedom in terms of, firstly, the arisal of anger, and then the strength of that anger that arises, and therefore the speech or physical activity that follows. This person too is without freedom. They have no mental control. And recognizing that this is an enslaved person, enslaved by their afflictions, we see how inappropriate it is to be angry at them.
sul khon lang ge sen do di lang zo khon lang marwa su de phi do shu mi de lo khon lang ge wang zo ge kyun ji ya bu mi de kye ya nga lu so pe de ko le kyun ji ji ge wa ji sang won ni shen nga zo su bu le ngo so the de na z dang de zo ge de do di ge so ba wa da ji sang dang nga zo do de lo khon ro ma la ba ko le kyun ji ma ji phi do yu ge mi de le kyun ji go ra ji sang de ni sa dollar rang ma ko mi di ma yu na do su yong nga yong ji su ba ti ma ji sa de ni sa phi yu ge de za wa de ko res ji dong ko le yang zo sam da kyun ji ji go ro wa di na xin pe di na xin dang nga zo ge mi di ge nga zo le ji gu ma gu ya da su su chi zu la ba chi zu da de ni ge du jia xie bai na de mi de le ya ko gung long le ya sam le ya kong ro ye ba za di gi chi go le chi ze mi kho la rang yo ma chi da mi di gi gyu gi da kong ro gung long sam lo ngan ba di de di me ba so go re nga zo da kong ro sa di ma zo di le ya gyön di dil ta go re chi sa nga zo di gyön di gung long de la sam ma da lam sa mi de le ya nga zo ge da di chi gyön che che ya da ko lam sang ko lo du ja re sam be sam dang go ro dāng zōng wēne samdā wēne dā mī kī kūnō dīli yā samlō ngāmbā chī lé bā zā kūnō dī kī gyōn chē chā nī mī dī kī nyo bā kī bā rē chē sā dāng zō kūnō dīli yā gyōn tā wō rē chē rē dā.
Another illustration, if someone throws a stone at us and it hits us and causes us some pain, we immediately get angry. And who do we get angry at, or what do we get angry at? Not the stone that hit and caused us pain, but the person who threw it. That's how it works. We hit with a stone, we immediately look who threw it, and that becomes the object of our anger. But the pain was caused by the stone. So why are we not angry with the stone, and it's the stone that caused us pain? Because we recognize the stone had no decision in this. The stone acted without any freedom, any control over the situation. And then we're angry at the person, believing the person acted with control over themselves, that person had freedom. But actually that's not the case. So let's go back to anger. Let's say this person was angry. So what caused the throwing of the stone wasn't the person, but that particular afflicted mind of anger. It was the anger that had dominated the person so that a stone was thrown. So therefore, we are correct in not being angry at the stone. It had no choice. But we are incorrect in blaming the person. The person had long since lost control. Their mind is dominated by the affliction of anger. And it's the anger that led to the stone being thrown. And therefore, if we want to blame anything, we should blame that particular affliction which had ripened in the person. That's the only thing that one can blame, not the stone, nor the person, because the person had no mental control, because they were overwhelmed by anger.
Yang tu ya kuma thong che de ya kang ba de ching de la dap che kang ba le ma su ne ya khong ro chi do khong de sing de la khong ro chi do de ne khong ro che chi sing de pa tu ya da de me ba so ya gi su go ro ba chi san sing de la khong lang go re chi san di ka re se ne sing de la da ma de sing de la ya shen gi wang ju je ne ma zo le na za da ba di a nga zo sam ko to go ma nga zo gi ne je ne nga zo gi sam no ya ko ta ba ne so su gi 다탕 야고마 제바제 미 야고마다 답교로와다 제가 교인들 소소려 디 삼노 콜 마토게 람사 신들이야 무슨 통해 코동도 해봐자 델이야 가서 콜라지 신들 두야 담배 봐서야 되더니 책교로와 다데딩아도 미지 되주변 더디로 콜 마사데 가서는 비니 미디로 콜라서 코도 유바 비니 유겐디 제법어딩아 저 무슨 통도 이거로와 되네선 하고 델이야 콜라 거로와 다 저기 삼야고다 어디디 나랑은 미마다 야마다 와래 디 교에 삼담바는 미니 답세 강부 답세 신들 콘랑 말와 디 삼담바도 미니까 강부 답세 신들 야도 콘라제 신디 파 자야다 두야데 되는 거와.
And similarly, if we're walking along and we stub our toe perhaps on a tree log, and that's quite painful, maybe we're just wearing open-toed shoes or sandals, then we're in some pain. To get angry at the tree is a bit stupid. The tree didn't choose to fall down, and it certainly didn't choose to have our foot kick it. But then similarly, to get angry at ourselves, that's a little strange. We didn't kick the tree intentionally. We were rather distracted or lost in our thoughts or not taking care. It was just the mind being distracted. Therefore, we stumbled over the log and hurt ourselves. To get angry at the tree, to get angry at ourselves, this is silly. Rather, we just weren't taking care. That's all. It was that mind that was at fault.
다데네 삼다나 지레딘마 콘조 기지마 레레장 까와 망보로 삭베기 시숨지 게자는 점버로 두베 다기 콘조 삼바 이기 굴랑 미자앙 냠비게 네발레 지메니 베세바 공고 그래서 세바 당세데.
The section concludes, because one moment of anger destroys the roots of the three bases of merit accumulated over many eons, do not allow thoughts of anger to arise. This is the practice of patience, unmoved by harm.
제가 다 콘트가 저기 대차당 콘트서야 되게 콘트서도 디바 체쇼래서 그래 디바는 통 콘트라야 돼. 제가 콘트만 깨지마 찍게와 있는 디기 균능부의 사병아도 류가 유숨기 가바 망보 사비기 시숨예 계산의 류가 유숨예 사비기 계획 자와디게 봐 뉴버 총도 마 점도 그래 좀 그래서 되네 좀 거래서 두 전에 삼당 거래서 제가 콘트배 균능부 예반에 된 딜레마가 좀 거래 제가 콘트만 깨지마 찍게와 있는 되는 좀 거래서 제가 디버디네 용거래 되네 인자 딱 콘트 사와데 콘트가 삼로데 셈 이기 구랑 미자스베 셈리아 셈디네 균에 기주메 삼베게 콘트 랑메 삼베 삼당고래제 미자 냠베게 두 삼당고래스 파 네베기 핸들 네발레 지메냐 바세데 네바치 핸들라.
One uses this point then to reflect on just how terrible an affliction anger is. Amongst its many faults, a further one is that it weakens the potency or the strength of virtue accumulated by the three bases or by the body, speech and mind over countless lifetimes. So recognizing that all this virtue that's been accumulated with such hardship, its strength or its potency is weakened by anger, one generates the determination from the depths of one's mind not to allow anger to arise, and certainly not to allow it to dominate us, and even more certainly not to act under its influence.
편연되네 용도 서바 마건 바체 너 콘트랑바 있나 안디기 네바 되네 용도 제다 라다 서바 고마 라다 샤니가 네바 되네 용도 선배게 되네기 김세 삼다 아니 서바 공비 파에 서바 마건비 니믹 삼다 되네 서바 공급이 김세 삼다 두스고 삼다제 서바 공고로와 제선 두스는 거래지래.
The way bodhisattvas then train here is that they meditate repeatedly on the great benefits of patience and the faults of not being patient or of remaining at risk of being angry. So in brief, they reflect on the benefits of patience and the faults of not being patient.
제가 쇠바 공급이 김정가르스나 나 전주선반님께 심정이 동아시아다 심정이 디기주비하게 된다라 근데 산조고 번 토바디고로 제가 제네 인자 쇠바 마건 바이나 ane karing 것은 semlia 콩로께 바이나 ane ndigi shenlia ngani tsuksukyaya da luine shenle nebe jawacheya semle yane yando khonjinge samlo ledi yunguro jesa luyu kone shenle neba chebaina nga kone shenle neba chebana tsurimsungo ma tsurimsungtuko ma kasen tsurimsuade shenle lunga yusumi shenle neba jigime sembe samlo rowa jesa di tsurim yago sungtuko ma da sebe nyamle yago chemado ba ina shenle jimbi nyamle chetuko ma dine mado ba ina 제 출마 송마도 반에 샬라 뉘르고래 제사 샬라 뉘바이네 전시신 비긴 냠는데 샬라 뉘바 지기 메세스 샬라 펜바 두근 송고 제사 샬라 펜바 두마도 샬라 뉘바 제바이네 전시신 비기 냠는 디고 말 제사 데네자 전시신 비기 세바 공급이 김제디리 데네 삼다 데도 세바 마공 바이나 소식이 뇽모 바디게 마 야슈처르고 데네 저바이나 산지고 토발랑 아주 뇽모 빵고고라 빵투고 말아 데네자 세비 냠는 제고비 김전데 소소라랑 심제담 산지고 토비 치도 삼다바이나 세비 냠는 제고고도 셴기 셴레 판버주바이나야 세비 냠는 제고고도 제 세비 냠는 미야고메나 셴레 판버주두고미도 제산다 산지고 보도 규야 사투고미도 데네자 세바 인치미지 공부고도 오체 다 세비 제산 데네 세바 공부비 규센 다는 세바 공나 판연 가르가르 요라서는 샹라 잠바 공토야 샹라 니지 공토야 셴니 동아세 토야 아니 소소기 데네게 세비 냠렌디야 누바 쳇셔도 안 산지고 보도베 타냐를 줘야 어두신의 삼다야 제 세비 판연 데네도 세바 먹은 바이나 ane sosole sem makiba cha dikvasaya di wangi tarbada sanjigo ma tobalaya ta rin chaya ane ngamba denigi leanga basadu digi kewachima ngasa ke dunganyo gyusaya sosole samdame shanle samdame na soso sebo magomba na kane tsiksu sha luju kone chebanga ba cheben shanla nyoba shanla kanga cheba ane shan makiba chaba dine shanla dine tikimindo rangla dine tikimindo chesa inji michi sebo 공부도 두 삼데네 공부 제바 제제하는 수비 냠는 거래 제로하다 저였으면 미
When the Bodhisattva reflects on the benefits or the need to engage in the meditation on patience and the faults of not doing so, they will do so in the context of their motivation. The motivation being, in brief, to benefit others. And in particular, to benefit others in the most needed of ways, to be able to skillfully guide others perfectly in accordance with their own individual personality to accumulate the causes for happiness and eliminate the causes for suffering. To do so, the Bodhisattva is determined to become a Buddha for the sake of others. So with this underlying motivation, the Bodhisattva reflects on the benefits or the need to cultivate patience and the faults of not doing so. Recognizing that if the Bodhisattva is not patient, anger will arise. Even as will even more often the lesser forms of anger, such as frustration and annoyance. And the mere arisal of these afflictions, especially if they abide, lead to accumulation of non-virtue. When it's expressed, either through physical behavior or verbal communication, then one is not being ethical. One's ethical restraint is harmed. So even the dominance or the arisal and sustaining of anger harms one's ethics. Certainly the expression of anger. Moreover, in terms of the perfection that came before ethics, that of generosity, should anger arise, how can one be generous to the person one is angry at? So the Bodhisattva here sees that if they aren't skilled in patience, their other trainings, such as ethics and generosity, are harmed. Therefore, not being patient, their own spiritual development is impeded. They will be suffering immediately, and through their spiritual development being impeded, sentient beings are harmed. Because if the Bodhisattva is not developing spiritually, their capacity to be of benefit to others is reduced. So therefore, through anger arising, others are directly harmed as well as indirectly harmed through the bodhisattva's spiritual developments being impeded. Moreover, to attain Buddhahood, the afflictions must be completely eliminated. So therefore, one has to be patient. If one's not patient, one will remain afflicted. So to become a Buddha, one has to have patience. Moreover, through being patient, especially through being patient, meaning that one's mind remains undisturbed in the face of adversity, then in the face of adversity, instead of accumulating non-virtue, rather love and compassion can grow within one ever stronger, and one can respond to a suffering being with love, with compassion, and thereby with wisdom. To the mind being undisturbed by the afflictions, one can be wise in how one responds. And therefore, one can help a suffering being and create powerful causes that bring Buddhahood ever closer. Whereas if one doesn't train in patience, then in that same adverse circumstance, one will accumulate non-virtue through the arisal of the afflictions, and through the expression of the afflictions, stronger non-virtues created, and others are harmed. Through this non-virtue, one is creating the causes for rebirth in the lower realms, and Buddhahood itself becomes ever more distant. So reflecting in these ways, it becomes abundantly clear that anger is never appropriate or justified, and that for one's own spiritual development and to be of benefit to others in the short and long term, one has to train in patience.
That's Buddhism
Whilst we are not bodhisattvas, the self-same training we can engage in. All those points are equally relevant for ourselves. So in brief, we're making the commitment to train our minds so that no matter what circumstance we are in, no matter how others relate to us, our mind will not become afflicted.
Zadang jogi semje tamjige donda sanyo goban toborsho sembe samlosta deningan jo shogen badu che samta dine samta sevijelia da diringi ane jilu lonje geso da je bakare yubane ya konchul chuopuya da shen semjenlia digi jua dunga se patangi samche dine ge samlochi da andi jelia andi diring da dine nge luanga yusum yokane shale nebe jawasa zawagine jigme sembe samlo da churim chegruwa andine samdane dene ane jige oda jenge sosulya jikanga teya do neba giga kane shobene pa disulya konro sawade zawagine langme sembe konro gyne langme samje ondu sene ngazo samdaidi nanga jugi du sene samda yane ya du samda bene dene lodi gombadi nyuba ya shukcher ro ne dene gi ngānsuya nyamne de yāra yāchoya chagurwa, dine zāngānsu dine ngānsu sāma āndus chene samdāngu de gechimbo chagwa reche, diringi lopsan di che, dānya mūtu che dine mā dade, dunga dānglīngi sūpa dāng dine mā jema dine mā shuya che.
Then briefly summarize, to briefly then mention how you can include this point as well as what we've looked at in the previous weeks in terms of the trainings of a bodhisattva, include in your meditation, to generate bodhicitta in the way that has been outlined previously. And then you cultivate the mind of generosity, where you offer all your possessions and inner good qualities and virtue to the three jewels, with the explicit intention to create virtue thereby, so that one can spiritually progress and be of ever more benefit to others. Then you cultivate thereafter the mind of ethical restraint, where you commit to restraining your mind from coming under the influence of the afflictions, and make the commitment not to harm others, certainly through our physical behavior, but also through our verbal communication, and also through guarding our mind not to be harmful itself. So here we train in ethics, and then thirdly, patience. We make the commitment that no matter what circumstances I encounter today, and here you can even think of circumstances you foresee you may well encounter that are difficult later in the day, and you make the commitment, I won't respond with anger, and rather role-play how one can respond skillfully. And doing so repeatedly over a sustained period, then this way of thinking, one will become ever more habituated to, and one will respond in this way naturally, spontaneously. So this is the training I commit to engaging in, and I hope that you too all engage in a similar meditation every day. So thank you. We'll conclude there. We'll continue from the same place, the bottom of page 41 next week, which is the second outline, the patience in facing the hardships that arise throughout one's life. But here we write on 8 o'clock, so if you have some questions, then do feel free to ask. If you can't wait for the questions, don't feel compelled. It's fine to go. Ditchen?
When anger arises, a lot of energy can arise with anger. And Western psychology often encourages us to get the anger out. And this might be in the form of yelling, going to the gym and punching, doing some physical, big, strong physical exercise, and just to help to disperse the energy of anger. And this often works. It's the energy that can keep one stuck inside, keep on stuck in negative ways of thinking. You might be able to control your way of thinking and saying, this is not appropriate, I don't want to behave this way, they are suffering too, but yet the energy of anger is still present. So I'll just be curious to see what Geshe Thubten has to say about how to dissipate the energy of anger.
So Western psychology often encourages the expression of anger to an inanimate object so as to get rid of the energy of anger. So can Geshe say something about skillful ways to get rid of the energy of anger? Yeah?
That's it, simplistic.
Yeah.
Di konra lambi kapla konra le de ba ina ane diwa chese shusha ba konra di ni ba ye ru ru zo ru ra ko de konra malang ye le ne kon kang zu kon su lang ju din jin de ko konra di de kang zu lang ju wa de be just kai mi no se da tu kan zu konra malang ye le ngan zu sam ta da ka san konra malang ye le ne konra lang di gi ma re se konra lang de gyuen sam ta konra malang ba so kom de yuen de sam ta de du sam ta ne ma ba na konra malang ge tablam di ye le ne sam ta di chi go ro da konra lang cha ba ina ane ele diwa morda khashi ju jinga go le shu be ne an ju konra de ni ba ye de de yon si ge de bena ga ju konra se de milia shi u kon lan de ya khashi ji she she ta pa lap sa ba she le ni ba pha shi ye do an che go ro de.
I can certainly see the benefit of wearing out the anger, getting rid of that energy of anger, whilst one is lost in the anger, whilst it has overwhelmed one. So just like if one is verbally responds with anger, verbally abusive towards someone else, then maybe you feel some people feel better afterwards for doing that. So I can understand that it can be beneficial that if one is overwhelmed by anger, that one expresses it in the way that you mentioned. So beating one's pillow, or I don't know, at the gym with the boxing thing, taking it out like that. I can see some benefit in doing that. But that, of course, doesn't help long term. So therefore, whilst if one is overwhelmed, or in the times one is overwhelmed with anger, there can be benefit to doing that. One then needs to, when one's mind is calm, to reflect on the faults of anger, the benefits of patience, and thereby, slowly over time, develop the skills so that in trying circumstances, one doesn't respond in the usual habitual way.
Tang hana zi maung ba na khoro malang tabshi de samlo daya re yumsen sam da je di yabu mindu samna yabu mindu sambi samna ya ne ya ta ba de del ya samlo de ling ba wa je za nga zi sanyi sho ge chu ji dine chi le lang ge sambi ge samlo phen ba ta ba na sanyi sho ge de ni to me na lam sa ni tak se tu go re phen ma da je oda sanyi le le ni de wa sam ba ne de du se de le ne ni se ge ma wa je za 소소게 디네 두수치랑아 랑긴다 선배 삼로지 공다네 삼로도 스타베네 산예 쇼데 니도 하면은 델레 두수텔레 니 닥세 두고로와 제가 디 삼로 펜베티 체고로 제가 디네사 먼저 마음바네 디네 샬레 녀비기 메다 콘랑 메다 선배 삼로 디네 잡아나 디기 슈디기 마음바나 셴기 녀바로 레소만 남상 콘로 메레바디 캬바 까투고 디기
So whilst there can be benefits in when one's in your own space, not around others, to express the anger in this way, it may make one feel better then, but it will not reduce the likelihood of anger arising as easily in the future. So therefore further skillful means are required. So here then, those further skillful means then are one needs to train one's mind in the way that has been specified here. So just like if you normally get up at a particular time, but tomorrow you know you have to get up much earlier because you have an important appointment and you cannot be late, making that determination the night before will ensure one does wake up earlier. Likewise, if tomorrow is just a lazy Sunday, then one doesn't need to generate such a thought and one can sleep in. Similarly, if one trains one's mind well, there's a strong determination not to be overcome by anger, but to rather ensure that at such times one remains patient, then slowly that will become one's second nature. Just to be clear, if you want to express your anger, rather use a pillow than beat the table. Because if you beat the table, your hand's going to get very sore and you're likely to get angrier.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.